voters in 6 states went to the polls as the race for the Democratic nomination narrows between Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. Here are the results that we are able to share at this hour. In Michigan, the most contested state in this election tonight, Joe Biden now the projected winner. Polls have just closed in the state of Michigan. In Mississippi, Joe Biden also the projected winner. And in North Dakota, the caucus there closed an hour ago. The results still coming in, and voting continues for 2 more hours in Idaho and in Washington state. There is no question, though, that the state of Michigan is the crown jewel of this election night. Both Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders have put considerable time and resources toward the Great Lakes state, so that is where we will begin tonight. Christy McDonald has been following the Michigan primary. She's a reporter and anchor for our partners at Detroit Public TV. So, Christy, we are able to project that Joe Biden is the winner. What do you attribute it to? You've been following, you've been talking to voters throughout.
Yeah, this is really a blow for Bernie Sanders. He was trying to build on what he was able to do here in Michigan 4 years ago, Judy. But from the voters that we've been talking to in the last several weeks, and especially since we saw Super Tuesday, a lot of the candidates get out of the race and coalesce around Joe Biden was who is going to be able to beat Donald Trump in November. They share a lot of the same feelings the voters do about health care importance there, the economy, wage stagnation. But again, everyone is really rallying around the thought of we've had 3.5 years of a President Trump administration. Who can beat him in November?
Do you have an understanding, Christy, from talking to voters who supported Bernie Sanders 4 years ago when he did pull out a win over Hillary Clinton? It was narrow, but he won. What's happened to that support for him?
Well, what happened in 2016 in Michigan, it's a very different Michigan now in 2020. You've seen a flip in 2018. We took back 2 congressional seats, the Democrats did, and then you saw a Democratic governor come in, as well as Democratic Secretary of State and Attorney General. And so there has been a real shift in the mindset here, and it's really looking more towards electability. So when they say Joe Biden, he has been there through the test of time, he's been here a long time in the Democratic Party, is he going to be the one who's going to be able to take on Donald Trump and win and end a Trump presidency after 4 years? Bernie Sanders, while he, again, we talk about how many of the young demographic, the 18 to 35, are big supporters of Bernie Sanders, but he wasn't able to build upon that. He also has a lot of outreach for Hispanic voters and also for Muslim Americans who live here in the state of Michigan, but he wasn't able to expand upon that base.
Christy McDonald reporting for us from Detroit. Christy, thank you so much. And now on to Mississippi. It's the only southern state holding a contest today. Southern states that voted on Super Tuesday broke for Joe Biden over Bernie Sanders. And the Associated Press, as we said, is projecting tonight that Mississippi is following suit. Adam Ganeshow is following the primary there. He is a political reporter for the nonprofit newsroom at Mississippi Today. Adam, based on what you see, how do you explain the big win, evidently the big win for Joe Biden?
Sure. Like I said, earlier in the evening, Mississippi's Democratic primary electorate is close to 75% African American. African Americans in this state, because I think of their trust in former President Barack Obama, and because of that trust, their trust in former Vice President Joe Biden, I think that went a long way in this race. Looking at some exit polls that were conducted, it looks like Joe Biden got roughly 84% of the African American vote in Mississippi. So again, knowing that the African American electorate makes up 3/4 or close to 3/4 of that Democratic primary electorate, I think that kind of explains it all here.
It was interesting that Bernie Sanders had a campaign event scheduled in Mississippi, and he canceled it in order to head to Michigan.
That's right. Yeah. I think a lot of people in the state, when Senator Sanders decided to cancel that visit and instead go to Michigan, to try to pick up some of the heavy primary voters there. A lot of people in Mississippi resented that. They thought of that as sort of a disrespect in a lot of ways, and that certainly didn't help. I don't think any rise in Sanders' candidacy specifically within that African American community in Mississippi.
And we should say, Adam, that as much as Joe Biden may be celebrating about Mississippi tonight, it's a tough hill for him to climb in November when if he's the nominee up against President Trump.
That's right. Here in Mississippi, this is a ruby red state. It's one of President Trump's strongholds, of any state in the country. This is, like I said, a conservative state. We'll definitely in November, early November, we'll be having a conversation about just how well President Trump did here, undoubtedly. But look, I think there are still in Mississippi even there are moderate voters who may have not necessarily appreciated some of what President Trump has done in his first 3.5 years in office, and certainly as this year progresses, we'll see what happens. But sure, this is certainly a stronghold for President Trump, and that'll play out in November.
Adam Ganesha with Mississippi Today. Thank you, Adam. And now to Missouri, one of the closest primary contests of the 2016 election cycle. Bernie Sanders lost the Democratic primary there to eventual nominee Hillary Clinton by less than half of a percentage point. Tonight, the Associated Press is projecting that Joe Biden will prevail over Sanders in Missouri this year. So Jason Rosenbaum has been following the contest, a political correspondent for St. Louis Public Radio. Jason, it's the show me state. What is it that Joe Biden showed to the voters?
He showed that Bernie Sanders' campaign for president may have ended tonight. And that may seem like hyperbole, but the fact that the Associated Press called Missouri within 2 or 3 minutes when it was only, as you mentioned, less than a half a percentage point in 2016 showcases that Sanders could not build on the coalition he had in 2016, and that voters in Missouri and other places that are considered either Midwestern or Southern states are going toward the former vice president's column. This is a huge triumph for Biden and a big psychological defeat for Bernie Sanders.
And we should say that this call was made with just, it looks like from what we were just showing there on the map, just 4% of the precincts reporting, but that means the interviews with voters today and the days leading up to today's vote strongly suggest that Joe Biden is way out front. What were voters telling you, Jason, in the days leading up to the primary about what mattered to them the most as they cast their ballots?
It all came down to which candidate will stack up best against President Donald Trump. Missouri is probably not going to be the battleground state it was in 2000, 2004, 2008. But Missouri Democrats here need a better top-of-the-ticket person than Hillary Clinton. When Hillary Clinton was at the top of the ticket in 2016, she lost the state by nearly 20 percentage points, and that doomed down-ballot candidates like Chris Koster for governor and Jason Kander for Senate. People like State Auditor Nicole Galloway, who's going to be running in a competitive race for governor against incumbent Governor Mike Parson, need someone like Joe Biden to close that gap in order to win. So even though Missouri is not the battleground it used to be, the result tonight, I think, is heartening for a lot of Missouri Democrats.
Jason Rosenbaum, St. Louis Public Radio, we thank you.
Thank you.
And all the way out west to Washington State, where voters are still able to submit their ballots for a little more than an hour and a half. It has the second biggest pot of delegates up for grabs on this election night. And Donna Blankenship is keeping track of the primary there. She is the political editor at KCTS 9 Crosscut. That is the PBS member station based in Seattle. Donna, when you and I spoke earlier this evening, you were telling me about what voters were confronted with. It's a state with mail-in ballots. Earlier in this contest, you had a number of candidates running, most of whom have dropped out, presenting a dilemma for a lot of voters.
Right. I just talked to a bunch of voters yesterday, and they said that they had to make their second or third choice when they ended up voting. Some of them voted before the candidates dropped out. So that's why our pollster thinks, one of the reasons our pollster thinks that Joe Biden is probably going to win this election in Washington.
And we also have spoken, Donna, about the fact that Washington State had caucuses as well as a primary beauty contest 4 years ago. This year is just the primary. How does that affect, do you think, Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders in this contest?
Well, it gives us a wider view of what the voters in Washington are thinking. The caucuses attracted a small, select group of voters, and the primary has always been more people showing up. That means that Washington, which has a variety of Democrats in our state, will all their voices will be heard this time. So it's more likely, I'd just be speculating, I guess, that the tendency is to go toward more moderate choice. That's probably why Hillary Clinton won the primary last time around 4 years ago, and Bernie Sanders won the caucuses.
Donna Blankenship with KCTS, thank you. We know you and all your colleagues dealing so much these days with the coronavirus outbreak, which has hit Washington State so hard. Donna, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
And now to look at what it all means for the big 2020 picture, I'm here with Amy Walter of the Cook Political Report and host of Public Radio's Politics with Amy Walter, and our own Lisa Desjardins. So hello to both of you. You had all of, 10 minutes to digest all of this. Amy, what is it all up to? Three big calls already
wins
for Joe Biden.
Right. There was a tidal wave that started on Super Tuesday for Joe Biden. The question was, could that wave keep coming in for him? And the answer, obviously, is yes. And it is propelled by his big wins in almost every single demographic category.
And what does that mean, Lisa?
Well, I mean, I think we're seeing him win urban, suburban, rural, men, women, black, white so far tonight. I also want to give us an update on the delegate count, where we are right now with these races called. Right now, Joe Biden, the former vice president, has, according to our count, 715 delegates. Bernie Sanders, 584. Of course, both a long way off from the 1991, but it is that trajectory, the margins that Biden is stacking up that make it harder for Bernie Sanders.
So those are the numbers of delegates you expect Biden to have at the end of this evening. Is that right?
I believe, including the calls that we've made right now, as of right now.
Including the calls.
The statewide.
Right now. But Amy, when you say winning every voter group, including young people, which has been Bernie Sanders.
He hasn't won young people. Here's a statistic I think is really important. Looking at Missouri, a state that, as you pointed out, was very, very close last time. Hillary Clinton narrowly winning it. In 2016, young voters made up 45% of the electorate, according to the exit polls. This year, the Associated Press voter survey, young voters are only 37%. Bernie Sanders winning them by 24%. That's a big number, but he won them by 33% in 2016. Older voters, I hate that they call everybody over 45 older, by the way, but anyway, voters over the age of 45 make up almost 2/3 of the electorate. And look at how big of a win Joe Biden there, more than 50 points. So losing younger voters, but not by as big of a margin as he's winning older voters.
A lot of ways to slice and dice this electorate. Lisa, what else are you looking at here?
Oh, I think watching Michigan is going to be fascinating, not just for this primary race, but of course for November. What does the Democratic coalition look like? Can they beat Trump in that state?
For sure, for sure. I'm looking at graphics in front of you that are all about urban and rural, and there's so much to look at. Lisa Desjardins, Amy Walter, thank you both.
Welcome.
And we would ask you to please join us at 11 p.m. Eastern for our special live coverage of these election results as they continue to come in.